Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to an hour-long session on the last day of GDC at 10 a.m. I appreciate it. Oh, I'm supposed to say, they told me to say a thing. Fuck, what do I say? Shit. No. We are off to a really good start, guys. Don't use Flash, because it scares me. Turn off noise-making things. All right. Hi. I'm Leighton Gray. I'm the co-creator, co-writer, and art director, and I guess head daddy of Dream Daddy, a dad dating simulator, the dating sim where you play as a hot dad, and your goal is to meet and romance other hot dads. And today, I'm here to talk to you about something that's really serious and very important, and just really close to my heart in a sentimental way, and that's, oh boy, don't ruin my gag, no. And that's memes, or more specifically, how to write and market games for the internet without embarrassing yourself too much. Step one, don't do this. Let's talk about why. Dream Daddy was a product of the internet, and there was a lot of intentionality in how we wrote, designed, and marketed it towards online communities like Tumblr, Twitter, and YouTube. And while we were working on the game, we were kind of making all of these creative choices in a vacuum, unsure if these ideas we had seeded in the game to get people to share it would actually work or not. And when we announced the game and subsequently released it, we finally got to see what worked and what didn't, and we were thankfully largely successful. We landed ourselves at the top-selling game on Steam globally on launch day, and we were named the third most trending game on Tumblr for 2017 and knocked Overwatch off the top spot for the first time in months, which was exciting. And I don't know about you guys, but it was pretty much impossible to go on any social media without seeing a ton of posts about how much people wanted to kiss these dads. So in this talk, I'm going to break down how we engineered the game from its inception to be as shareable as possible, and how you can apply these same principles to your work as well. And to understand what gets people to share, let's begin by talking about what really, really doesn't. You may have seen this internal Google document that was leaked a while ago called It's Lit, which covers what the cool teens think is dank and on fleek. And if there's one thing I know about cool teens, it's that the only thing they love more than the Beatles and Coldplay is bowing down to our corporate overlords by relying on brands to shape their world. As the kids say, SMH. And because companies follow clueless internal documents like this one, they do stuff like this. And this is a whole Twitter account that just collects brands being horrifically out of touch. A bunch of grown people sat at a table and were like, this is our marketing strategy, we're doing great. So obviously nobody likes it when a 35-year-old PR dude tells you that it's on fleek to buy a roast beef sandwich. And another big issue here is that when brands do stuff like this, it shows that they're hearing consumers, but they're not actually listening. And with an ever-increasing awareness of and skepticism towards transparent marketing ploys and pandering, it's more important than ever to have a deep working understanding of the community your game is for so that you don't get endlessly dunked on by an army of 15-year-olds on Twitter. And we talk about this in Dream Daddy for a little bit when you ask your teenage daughter to explain memes to you. There's Eggy. So Amanda says, Dad, it's complicated. See, memes are inside jokes shared by a bunch of people that get less funny the more people do it. So the problem is that by the time a meme gets to you, Dad, all of us youths have already done the joke to death. And what's worse than that is that movies and TV and video games will try to jump in on a meme train, but just based on how long it takes to make them, the meme will be long dead by the time it comes out. So it just dates it and isn't funny. And then of course you say, oh shit, what up, because we're hacks. So if trying to incorporate memes into your work is the kiss of death, how do we effectively write content that exists adjacent to internet culture without directly referencing it? And how can we take concrete steps to encourage the organic spread of our work? And to answer that question, I'm going to talk about every game developer's favorite topic, art history. Yay. And if it's not obvious from literally everything about me, I dropped out of art school. So modernism was the first major art movement of the early 20th century. It came in on the heels of the Romantic movement, which was all about aestheticizing intense emotion, and it was extremely melodramatic and lofty. So in response, modernism focused on defying the traditional ideas of the 19th century, and this also coincided with the Industrial Revolution. This movement encouraged artists and writers to try new things and explore unorthodox ideas with enthusiasm and to question everything. Artists like Picasso, Duchamp, Kandinsky, and writers like James Joyce and Marcel Proust are perfect examples of modernism. They were all doing things nobody had seen before. And as we approached the mid to late 20th century, the reaction to modernism was postmodernism. While modernism was more of an art movement than anything else, postmodernism was just as much a philosophical movement intended to critique society and culture as it was an art movement. And as a whole, postmodernism can be defined by a heavy sense of cynicism and irony towards everything. There's a huge emphasis on nihilism, the idea that truth is a subjective construct, and it made things like parody and pastiche popular. And a big element of postmodernism was intertextuality and references to other media. For instance, Scream is a really great example because it repeatedly references and subverts horror movie tropes. For postmodernism, just imagine a bunch of artists in black turtlenecks, chain smoking, and generally just being miserable. But remember postmodernism because we will get back to it in a minute. Because a lot has changed since the postmodern movement started. And one of the biggest changes has been the advent of the internet. Postmodernism doesn't really give us the tools that we need to meaningfully navigate our relationship with current content because the internet has had such a huge impact on the way that we create, consume, and share media. And so much of an impact that we're currently experiencing a huge cultural shift from mass media to social media. We've gone from a top-down model of distribution to a participatory culture where consumers are not just consumers of static, unchanging content. They're people who are reshaping and remixing the context and meaning of media. And the language that currently exists around content that becomes successful on the internet unnecessarily mystifies this entire process. When we say something goes viral, we're robbing both the content creator and the audience of their agency. Like we're passively infecting each other with content, which is not how it works. And consulting, marketing, and PR firms will dangle this concept of going viral above your head to get you to give them money and to intentionally muddy the process of what it takes to create a successful product. And we can even track where this kind of thinking originated. The term meme was introduced in 1976 in Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene, as the cultural corollary of the gene, the idea being that a meme propagates itself in a way similar to genes. And I kid you not, he uses the phrase meme pool, which is a pretty fun mental image. And this sort of biological metaphor is a big reason why we oversimplify this process down to virality. And of course, memes have been around a long, long time before we had a name for them. Humans figuring out how to start fire is a meme. It did not necessarily look like this, but it is still a meme. And I'll have you know that I worked really, really hard to get this as artifacted as possible. Idioms are memes. Metaphors are memes. Tropes in media are memes. A meme is just an idea that can spread and mutate and be improved upon. Even with classical paintings, artistic movements are defined by a certain collection of memes. Like, guys, I hate to break it to you, but even the great masters were just doing like really exceptional Jesus fan art. Like all it's missing is the flower crown. And in the 19th century, women's scrapbooking culture revolved around cutting interesting tidbits out of books and newspapers and collecting them in a single place so they were easily shareable, which is pretty much just old-timey Pinterest down to the weird obsession with mason jars. I mean, one could even say that it's uncanny, because it's... You guys love blasphemy, but you won't stand for dad puns? Okay. You came to the Dream Daddy talk. Did you really think I was not gonna... All right. My point is, the internet just accelerates behaviors we were already doing, and we as members of a networked community choose to share content that's meaningful to us. So instead of placing the onus on this seemingly unknowable, magical phenomenon, virality, it's more productive for us as game developers to analyze how we can imbue content with the kind of meaning that will compel people to share. And this idea to counter virality is called spreadability, the intersection of qualities that optimize content for sharing through social media. This model recognizes that the driving force behind what we share comes from a social place and that our lives aren't defined by brands. Rather, we use the media we consume to facilitate conversations that we're already having, just like humans have always done with all forms of art from the beginning of time. Which brings us back around to art movements. How can we tap into this collective culture and figure out what will make people share when internet culture is so nebulous and ever-shifting? I mean, you ever go without checking Twitter for a couple of days and then you come back and you're like, what the fuck is everybody talking about? Like, it's a daunting task, and I can often feel like you're trying to hit a moving target. But by understanding the art movement that we're currently on the cusp of, it can take some of the guesswork out of it. So on a sliding scale of sincerity and cynicism, with modernism being very sincere and postmodernism being very cynical, what does that mean for the current state of art and philosophy? How could we possibly describe this emerging culture of media born from the internet? I don't know. That's the talk. Bye. I will tell you in a second. It's metamodernism. This is the part where I die on stage. All right, which in a nutshell is a movement defined by ironic detachment with sincere engagement. The Metamodernist Manifesto was written by artist Luke Turner and the man, the meme, the legend himself, Shia Labeouf. Here's a basic rundown of the core tenets of metamodernism. It acknowledges that prescribing exclusively to either solely modern or postmodern ideas limits our ability to tell robust, complex stories, and that the best storytelling comes from oscillating between two poles, primarily sincerity and cynicism, but also a highbrow and lowbrow, optimism and doubt, relativism and truth, etc. Like, it reflects real life. Our lives are not just solely one thing or one thing, like it's kind of a mixed bag. And this is where the meta prefix comes from, not in the sense that something is self-aware or self-referential in a meta way, although it can be and often is. It comes from the word metaxy, meaning an in-betweenness. It also aims to collapse distances between disparate groups of people. It acknowledges the layered identities we present both online and in real life. And finally, it embodies a sense of radical optimism and self-love in the face of decades of postmodernism's unbridled cynicism. One of the most notable things about metamodernism is that the parameters are extremely loose. Media doesn't have to ascribe to all these tenets to be considered metamodern, and this idea is commonly referred to in metamodern texts as an affective feeling, since metamodern media often borrows, mutates, and remixes elements from modernism and postmodernism. I like to compare it to early 2000s fashion, but just with less of just whatever that is. You can combine and pay homage to many different tropes and feelings to create something totally new that doesn't feel as tired as a lot of postmodern tropes do at this point. To put all this in perspective, let's look at some games that I would consider postmodern versus a few I think are firmly metamodern. Oh no. Hello, this is Shia Labeouf. I'm actually going to talk about Shia Labeouf first. That's what's happening now. So Shia Labeouf has done a lot of really, really interesting things with metamodern media. If you'll recall, a couple of years ago, he did this performance art piece that was called hashtag I am not sorry, where he sat in a room with a bag over his head that said, I am not famous anymore. And if you recall the way that the media kind of reported on this, it was very much like, oh, look at those wild celebs, they're at it again. And what actually happened is that people would go in, expecting it to be something silly like that, and they would come in and they'd take the bag off of Shia's head because it was a very high art kind of thing where he's just sitting in a room and you could kind of do whatever you wanted with him. So they take the bag off of his head and he'd be crying. And then this person who has only ever known about Shia Labeouf as like this celebrity, this symbol, suddenly has this like very real moment with him, and a lot of people would start crying themselves and they would like hold his hand and try to console him and actually have like a much more meaningful experience. And I highly recommend that anybody go check out Shia Labeouf's other work. He's done a lot of really interesting performance art pieces aside from getting arrested for public intoxication in Savannah, Georgia, which is for a place with open container laws, that's hard to do. Anyway, now let's talk about games that are postmodern. The Stanley Parable and Portal both deconstruct traditional ideas surrounding player agency, and a game like Sonic Dreams Collection lampoons Sonic fan culture in the late 90s. And all three of these games are pretty resoundingly cynical and feature varying degrees of subversion in their respective genres. Postmodernism. Progressing past this era of postmodern work, we have games like Undertale and Doki Doki Literature Club. The distinction here is that both games are deconstructions of deconstructions. Undertale is particularly notable in this sense because it plays with RPG tropes in several different ways. The fact that the player is constantly faced with choosing between pacifism and violence and then has to live with the consequences is very metamodern because, again, it's that oscillation between those poles without totally reconciling them. And then you have characters who are aware of your previous actions and comment on them and breaking the fourth wall by making direct appeals to the player. So, Doki Doki Literature Club. Sorry to leave you guys hanging. Is on one level a deconstruction and commentary on a lighthearted dating sim and all the trappings of the genre. Your childhood best friend, a blank slate male main character, takes place in a high school, anime titty, and then as the game starts to take a darker turn, it starts playing off of horror tropes as well, and then becomes extremely meta once Monica addresses the player directly. The game manages to be simultaneously cutesy, sweet, and endearing, while also just absolutely horrific. It allows the player to hold both ideas at once. And I believe that it's no coincidence that these two games have enjoyed a lot of success and have garnered massive fandoms, because ultimately, metamodernism is the source of all internet culture and it informs the sensibilities of some of the most popular media right now, such as Rick and Morty, the music of Childish Gambino, BoJack Horseman, Bo Burnham's stand-up, Black Mirror, and Homestuck, which I put in there because apparently it's 2012. So let's break down what each of these core tenets really mean and how we utilize these ideas to make Dream Daddy a success. So sincerity wrapped in cynicism is the really, really big one that if you remember one thing from this talk, remember that. The guiding idea of metamodernism is pretty well embodied by this Jerry Saltz quote. I know that the art I'm creating may seem silly or stupid, or that it might have been done before, but that doesn't mean that this isn't serious. And by wrapping a sincere story in this cynical exterior, you're basically Trojan horsing meaning into your game. I kind of like to think of it like salted caramel, like you get the salty and the sweet, and they both bring out the best in each other, and now I'm really hungry. But a perfect example of this in a game that Dream Daddy would not exist without is Hotful Boyfriend, the pigeon dating sim. Yes, I know you like kissing birds, thank you. And what clearly looks like a very silly game where you play as a human girl dating birds has been pretty widely regarded as one of the best dating sims out there. Players praise the surprisingly well-written story and sprawling lore. So this is a particularly effective technique that also worked for us. Setting the player's expectations low with the promise of something silly or weird, dating birds, kissing dads, and then doing a bit of a bait and switch with a story that's actually meaningful. Because let's face it, it's really hard to just tell a serious story at face value on the internet. We have to steep it in a few layers of irony so it's palatable because the internet has ruined all of our brains and just turned us into whatever fucked up sense of humor the internet has done to us. I really don't understand it. But if Dream Daddy was instead just called like Favorable Fathers and was a straightforward story about the experience of being a single dad, it would have been seen as a little overly sentimental. You know, you gotta put daddy in the title, gets them in the door. And because people unfortunately already tend to have low expectations of dating sims as a genre, we were able to pleasantly surprise players with a story with hidden depth. Because one second you're hanging out with the goth dad who loves shopping at Hot Topic and writing his own smutty Naruto fiction that he then gets leather-bound. And then the next, he's giving a monologue in a graveyard about how death helps him appreciate his life more. And even though the game is about dating dads, it's also pretty heavily about the experience of growing up in a single-parent household, and that resonated with people. Next, collapsing distances. I'm gonna collapse the distance between me and this water. Hydration is important. Because the internet is an incredible tool for connecting us with people from all walks of life from all over the world and then yelling at all those people from different walks of life for having opinions, metamodernism places a heavy emphasis on exploring not only our differences, but the things that we have in common. This is where what I will lovingly call #relatable #content comes from, because at their core, internet memes are just super condensed storytelling to communicate a universal truth. Like, we all do the thing where you stand in the shower and then you fill your mouth with water and then you spit it out like you're a water fountain. It's a feeling of like, me too, I do that. And also most memes that get really popular kind of boil down to the same format. Like, thing you should be doing, thing you should not be doing, thing you should be doing, thing you should not be doing, but you're gonna do anyway. And you know, this one. And if you want to go like really Freudian with it, what this is really expressing is this. So what I'm saying is that memes are gonna enter the literary canon as works of high art someday. Anyway, further extrapolating that kind of meme-y thing into a video game narrative is as simple as writing truthfully and authentically. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but your best writing is going to come from a place of vulnerability, and that authenticity will always shine through. Dream Daddy has been pretty widely praised for having a very genuine and heartfelt story, and I think so many of the most touching moments in the game came from some deeply vulnerable places for me and my co-writer Vernon. And we touch on a lot of serious subjects like alcoholism, imposter syndrome, toxic masculinity, etc. Like, by allowing yourself to be vulnerable with players, they can connect with you more. Like, for example, whoa, guys, holy shit. I'm up here, I'm doing a talk, we had technical difficulties. I spent the last hour freaking out. I have not had breakfast. I hate public speaking, it's really stressful. I'm having a bad time. Anyway, we're back. Thank you. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. By choosing to be vulnerable, you guys hopefully feel a little bit more connected to me as a person. And if you don't, then just act like you are. I don't know, work with me. I was vulnerable with you, don't take advantage of that. Anyway, one of the things we did post-announcement were these character introductions, which were actually modeled around tag me memes like this one. And if you've never seen one of these before, they're typically a bunch of simply drawn characters with these brief descriptions. I always end up comparing them to horoscopes. Like, there's these sets of traits that really could be applicable to anybody, but the idea is that you tag the one that you're most like, and then you also tag your friends. And so we did these, and following that, people really related to these descriptions of the characters, and even if they didn't exactly, they tagged their friends who did, which is another entry point for new players. And so we decided to post a blank version for people to put their own dadsonas onto, because people were sending us so much fan art of them anyway. I mean, like, look at those good boys. And what actually ended up happening is that people kind of turned it into a meme. It was just this for a very long time. We kind of had to, like, not check the notifications because you guys are some memers. So you can definitely draw inspiration from memes without clumsily shoving them in places where they don't belong. And another example of this happened when I got some of the early sketches of Joseph Sprite from our wonderful character artist, Shannon Pei. I had passed off my designs, and when she showed me this pose, I was like, that looks really familiar. Why does that look so familiar? And then I realized, oh, he looks like, you know, I had to do it to him guy. I should get her to change that. And then I thought, no, I should not, because that creates an opportunity for people to make that connection on their own, to speculate whether it was on purpose or not, or to just make jokes about it. And sure enough, we got a ton of tweets like this. I'm thrilled. This is exactly what I wanted. So metamodernism also stresses the understanding of other perspectives, which goes hand in hand with inclusivity and diversity. And when I was submitting my pitch for a talk, I considered doing one about writing inclusivity, and then I realized that that talk would be 60 seconds long, because all I have to say is, just fucking do it! Write diverse characters, represent diverse groups of people, and if you're not sure how to write perspectives that are different from your own, find someone who does and give them money. It's that easy. And if you've never written a song before, and you don't know how to read music, and you don't know how to play any instruments, and you don't know anything about music theory, and also you've never actually even listened to music before, are you going to set out to create the entire soundtrack of your game recorded from scratch in your basement? No, you're gonna hire someone who knows what they're doing. It's the same thing. And obviously, neither Dream Daddy's co-creator Vernon Shaw or I are gay dads, so we were constantly talking to a lot of gay men, trans men, actual fathers, and other members of the LGBT community to get feedback, and the game is so much richer for it. And I really do not want to hear that writing perspectives that are inclusive is some kind of niche topic that won't make money, because if the success of Dream Daddy is any indication, there is a huge demographic of people that is starved for content that represents them. I know. I'm a member of that demographic. And these people deserve to feel included. And further, not only is putting together a diverse cast a wonderful step towards inclusivity, it's just more realistic. Diversity is just good storytelling. And also, I'm gonna advocate for doing your research. I am a huge nerd, and I love reading a lot of books, and you should too if you're a writer. So like, do as much research as you can and keep a running notebook of what you're learning. Creating a vocabulary of knowledge that you can draw upon as you're writing is gonna make your work so much better. And when you get stuck on story, you can always go back to those notes for inspiration. And when we started writing Dream Daddy, I checked out a bunch of books from the library on pretty much anything, even tangentially related to the story. Being a dad, being a single dad, the cultural ideas wrapped up in patriarchal societies, being a gay dad, the history of the gay man in America, etc. And we learned so much that we otherwise never would have touched on. Just read more is my point. Also, if you enjoyed Dream Daddy or like My Brother's Husband, please read Does This Baby Make Me Look Straight by Dan Bukatinsky, because it's fantastic and really funny, and it made me cry a lot. And obviously, we're gonna talk about layered identities now. The way we present ourselves varies based on who we're talking to. The way you tell a story to your parents is probably very different from the way that you tell a story to your friends. And similarly, the way that you present yourself on Facebook is probably very, very different from the way that you present yourself on your private vent Twitter. Don't act like you do not have one. I know about the anime shit posting. It's okay. We're all friends here. And one of the cool things about metamodernism is that it encourages us to really explore how we express these different facets of our personalities through not only social media, but video games as well. I know I'm not the only person in this room who spends an inordinate amount of time on character creators. There's a community of people who I think really want more gaming experiences that let them explore themselves, and games that can teach them something about who they are, or give them an opportunity to explore their sexuality or gender identity when they might not be able to do so in real life. And there's no better testament to how underserved this community is than the popularity of Dragon Age and Mass Effect among young women and queer people especially. The fandoms for these games are vibrant and thriving, and most of the fan content revolves around exploring the relationships between the characters and creating work about the players Shepard, Warden, Inquisitor, Hawk, etc. And while these games are of course amazing in their own right, I think that the robust character creators combined with very well-written friendships and romantic relationships really encourage this type of extensive engagement beyond playtime because it creates a deeper emotional investment. I'm so thirsty, literally and figuratively. Trying to play off of this, our goal with writing Player Dad and designing the character creator was to give people lots of options to customize their dad, making sure to include a wide variety of skin tones, facial features, body types, options to have a trans dad, as well as more androgynous and feminine options to choose from. And I would include all the tweets from people thanking us for having a character creator that actually represents them, but I did not want to start weeping in the middle of this talk and be unable to continue. If you went to Tyler's talk earlier this week, you got to see us both cry. It was great. You also make some decisions in the first 5 minutes of the game in regards to the gender of your dead spouse, as well as whether Amanda is your biological child or if she was adopted. And these choices had very little effect on the rest of the game aside from changing a few variables, but they proved to be really meaningful to people in how it dictated their character's past and sexuality. Oh God, excuse me. God, they give you the lapel mic and you can't even lean away. It's like, you're just gonna hear all of it. This is who I am. What's wrong with, no. And full credit again to Dream Daddy's brilliant director, Tyler Hutchison, who's sitting right over there. At least I hope it's Tyler. A bunch of people look the same when the lights are really bright. That's you, okay. And you know, it was also his idea for the binder bods, and he gave the amazing talk earlier this week about how you as a straight white dude can take small steps to make a world of difference for players, which if you missed, please check out on the vault, it was wonderful. Anyway, one of the major things that compels people to share things with others on the internet is whether the content communicates something about the person or their relationships with others. So creating an opportunity for players to express themselves, especially through a character creator, is something that is pretty much guaranteed to be shareable. I mean, do you guys remember when Miitomo came out and Twitter was just only Miitomo for a long time? Everyone just wants to show everybody else what they look like in cute cartoon form. It's a universal thing. It's what brings us all together. We love cartoons. And finally, we have radical optimism. And I like to describe this recent shift over the past couple of years as the progression from the popularity of me-IRL memes, which are about hating yourself and being depressed, These are all fun. These are relatable. And we went from this to wholesome memes, where you want to support your friends and pet dogs and just be kind and positive. And right now, I think people are really craving stuff that's silly and fun and uplifting because, boy, things are kind of dire in the world right now. And as you can see from this highly scientific line graph, depression memes continue to be popular, but wholesome memes are slowly rising up and taking over. And this little spike right here that kicks it off is, what do you know, 2016 election, yeah. And if you take a look at the kind of content that fan communities create, which we can assume is what people really, really want out of their stories, time and time again, for every fandom that I looked up on AO3, what could possibly be more popular than angst, blowjobs, and anal sex? This is a real thing that I wrote into my talk, and I regret it a little bit now. Anybody want to guess what it is? It's fluff. And for those who have never read fanfic, and first of all, yeah, okay, sure. Fluff is just comedic, silly, sweet fanfic with little to no substance. It's like the wholesome equivalent of a lemon or a porn without plot. And at this point, I think we're all pretty burned out on cynicism in characters who don't talk like real people do, and stories that are just grim and gritty for the sake of being grim and gritty. And I'm not saying that your game should just be sweet and simple, but people seem to respond really strongly to stories about characters who genuinely care about each other and they want the best for each other. And when we were writing the game, it was also really important to us that none of the humor punched down, so to speak. We tried really hard to keep everything positive and, again, inclusive, because jokes that punch down hurt your players. And with comedy, your jokes are going to create in-groups and out-groups. And by punching down, you're tightening the radius of that in-group smaller and smaller and potentially alienating players that would otherwise really enjoy your game. Plus, going for the low-hanging fruit is just so done and creatively bankrupt at this point. I mean, look at Ricky Gervais. Can he chill? Can he find some chill? And by not punching down, you're actually going to force yourself to be even more creative, and your writing will be better. This mentality also extended into the approach that we took for our social media accounts. We always tried to come from a place of positivity and support, which ranges from how we responded to fan art to how we responded to angry players reporting bugs. It's sort of like when you go to Disney and you ask, they can't tell you the park closes at 8, they have to say the park is open until 8. So we adopted the voice of a supportive, proud dad on Twitter, and people responded really well to it. And the coolest part that us being positive in turn got the fans to be supportive and kind to each other as well. So you really have the power to set the tone of how people interact with both you and other players. So now that I've gone over the core tenets of metamodernism, which are, again, sincerity wrapped in cynicism, collapsing distances, radical optimism, and layered identities, let's talk about how you can utilize these principles to create a product that's very spreadable. So the moment that we see a piece of content on social media, before we're even consciously aware of it, our brain is already making decisions about its shareability. A 2011 study by a group of psychologists at UCLA put a bunch of students through an fMRI scan as they were exposed to different pitches for a variety of fake TV shows and instructed to role play as interns and to take note of the pitches that they would potentially want to share with producers. The psychologists determined that the moment a group of students role-playing as interns were first exposed to an idea that they would ultimately decide to share with the producers, this area in the brain called the temporal-parietal junction would light up, and it's the area between the temporal and parietal lobes oscillating between two areas of the brain, metamodernism. So the temporal-parietal junction is actually a part of the outer layer of the brain called the Mentalization Network. Mentalizing is the process of understanding how other people think and feel, and this entire network is engaged when we see something that we might potentially share with others. And this is the same part of the brain that theoretically would have been engaged when ancient humans dragged a fresh kill back to their tribe. We're deeply wired to want to share things of quality with those that we care about. And even though the TPJ's connection with social media is still being pretty extensively researched, we can actually use this information to our advantage by looking at the kinds of rapid-fire questions we're subconsciously thinking when we see an interesting post on social media. Namely, is this content worth engaging with? Is it worth sharing? What's the best platform to spread it through? Might it be of interest to specific people? Does it convey something about who I am or my relationship with others? And does it reflect the values of my community? And some questions you'll want to ask yourself in your design process to make sure that the answers to all of those questions are a resounding yes. You want to think about, is it portable, quotable, grabbable? Is it available when and where audiences want it? Is it easily reusable in a variety of ways? Is it relevant to multiple audiences? And if so, who? Is it a part of a steady stream of material? And because so much of the way people interact with games now takes place outside of playtime and fan communities and on social media, encouraging this kind of engagement is essential for ensuring that your game is spreadable. And there are a couple of different things that you can do to create a game that leaves room for people to sink their teeth into the work and run with it. And with the way this participatory culture works, you as a dev need to be okay with relinquishing a certain amount of control over your IP. Think about it like this. You hand somebody a finished novel. They'll read it and they'll have a good time, sure, but what if you handed the same person a Mad Lib and told them to fill it in? And then you hand hundreds of other people the same Mad Lib, and they're all gonna have different ways of filling in the blanks, and then they're gonna fight each other over how they filled in the blanks, but they're gonna be so much more engaged because they get to decide what this story means to them. And some things that can create these little Mad Libs gaps for players include tapping into shared fantasies, humor, parody, references, and intertextuality, unfinished content, mystery, timely controversy, and the dreaded discourse, and rumors. Going in depth into each of these would be an entire talk in itself, but as one example, we didn't end each of the dad's date paths essentially at the beginning of a romantic relationship just because we didn't have forever to write a sprawling epic of a dating sim. It was partially that. But by leaving the endings ambiguous and open-ended, it created an opportunity for players to decide for themselves what happens next, and has spurred a ton of fan art and imagines and fanfics and memes. And I know that it can be really difficult to relinquish some of that control, but giving people room to remix, pay homage to, and meme elements of your work not only creates a community where everyone feels more invested in a property because they're able to help shape the context of the work, but it also creates a network of entry points for people to be exposed to your product. Traditional marketing and PR avenues are still very important, and we definitely did our fair share of spreading press releases. But as you can see, grassroots rallying from fans casts a much wider net that is not only going to reach a much wider audience, but people are so much more likely to be interested in your game when it's being endorsed by someone they know or respect, rather than it just being hawked at them by an advertisement. Because, let's face it, nobody wants to be marketed to, especially while they're playing a game or just trying to read their friends' hot takes on Facebook. And the same demographic that responds positively to the principles of metamodernism consists of a bunch of young people who hate all of the trappings of late-stage capitalism, so you kind of need to be tactful about it. And marketing should not be your last step, it should be your first. It should be an ongoing conversation throughout the development process. Understand who your game is for, what that community values, and how your game can facilitate, subvert, or reinforce the conversations people are already having. Going back to this slide, I want to talk about portability because I think that's arguably the most important point on this list. A big part of getting an idea to travel on the internet is by really optimizing its portability. This often boils down to nailing your elevator pitch, but not the stop at every floor waiting for people to get on and off elevator pitch. And honest to God, under 30 seconds elevator pitch. What is your game about? Dream Daddy co-creator Vernon calls it compressible content theory. The more easily and concisely you can explain an idea, the further it will travel on the internet. Dream Daddy, a dad dating simulator, is exactly what it says on the tin. The dating sim where you play as a hot dad, and your goal is to meet and romance other hot dads while raising your teenage daughter who's about to leave for college. Someday I will get it to the speed of side effects for medication and commercials, but today it's not that day. And even the acronym for the game, DDA, DDS, communicates what the game is about. And I don't think I'm ever gonna be able to do anything better than that acronym. I can't live up to that. I've peaked. Further, when I was designing the characters, there were a few guiding principles I tried to keep in mind. Because fan communities can create so many new entry points for new players, it was important to me that the dads could be easily recognizable down to their simplest elements. and even recognizable just based on color scheme. It was also important to me that, I know, I love it. It was important to me that all of the characters could be cheaply and easily cosplayable. My hope being that you could walk into any thrift store and walk out with most of the items you would need to pull off a decent cosplay. And not only is it just an indescribable joy and honor to see so many people's takes on the characters, these cosplays also bolster the spreadability of Dream Daddy and can act as yet another entry point into the game's world for the uninitiated. And I feel like both of these things are kind of the visual corollary of compressible content theory, so the designs are still readable whether it's cosplay, really cute chibis, dogs, or ponies. We also tried to create what we called screen cappable moments, moments that we engineered so people would want to post a screen cap to Twitter or Facebook or tell their friends in a group chat. And a lot of these ended up being absurd jokes, wholesome stuff, relatable content, or, you know, thirst. And speaking of thirst, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. But the end goal with all of these was to have players share a screen grab, and for that to get people to ask, what is this? What is Dream Daddy? And this even applied to our Steam page. This Tumblr post by a random user, not affiliated with us at all, thank you, this person, and it was just a screen cap of the Steam page. It got 200,000 notes. And this sort of thing works really well. You just have to be very intentional about it. Because what all of this boils down to is that when you create a piece of work that aligns with metamodernism and spreadable theory, you're maximizing the shareability of your game because it shows that you're not just hearing your community, you're actually listening. So to round up, now that you understand the concepts of metamodernism and spreadability, I hope that you can start spotting elements of metamodernism in the media you consume and start incorporating those principles into your work. And remember that when you create content that exists adjacent to the internet without directly referencing it, that makes you the most on fleek bae of all. Thank you. Yay. And if you're interested in reading more about metamodernism, spreadability, or just checking out some of the sources I mentioned in this talk, here's a link where it's just a ton of books, websites, interviews. There's like a shorter version of this talk if you want to share it, it'd be great. And you know, follow me on all the stuff or don't, because it's not great. And also follow my dog on Instagram. She's really cute. And please fill out the speaker evals that you will be receiving because I would love to come back here and just fumble my way through yet another talk. But we have, oh, I finished really early. We have a lot of time. People ask questions so I can feel less bad about finishing so early. There's mics. Any question? Hufflepuff, what's up?
Yo, so I was wondering, so usually a lot of content for like, you know, metamodernism stuff is like more appealing towards like millennials, basically. I was wondering how do you work with trying to like relate this to like other people of other generations, I suppose?
That is a really interesting point. I think Dream Daddy is a really extremely targeting millennials and Gen Z kind of game. And that's not something that I've really thought about because the approach that you would need to take to appeal to potentially people who are older would involve different social media because I feel like there's been this mass migration away from things like Facebook for people of a certain age because they're like, ugh, my grandma's on there. I'm like, I don't want her to see my anime posts. So that's a really good question that talk to me afterwards and maybe I'll say something more articulate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good scarf. Anybody else? Wow, we're just getting like nonstop looks here. Is that a vaporwave skirt?
Yeah, it totally is. It has like the doot-doot skeleton on it. It's like, seriously, we're talking memes here.
Where is that from?
We can talk after.
Okay, all right. I get it. You don't want to share your fashion secrets. It's fine. What's up?
When, if, can any of this backfire?
Constantly and all the time.
Right.
Always. I think, you know, knowing to not put memes in your stuff can reduce the possibility of that backfiring because if you look at social media for like any major brand, which is really what spurred this talk of like Denny's Twitter, Wendy's Twitter, like they're kind of doing okay, but I feel like there's only so long that we could get away with doing this before everyone kind of catches on and it's like, oh, the jig is up. I think the thing that you should focus on first is like, make a good thing before you try to make a spreadable thing. And if it's good, I don't know, cream rises and like people will see that it is good. Yay. Oh, there's other people at that mic. Hi, what's up?
There first.
Oh, no, by all means.
Okay, so you have to fight.
Well, just to follow up on the
Fisticuffs.
Twitter thing, I'll go ahead. You mentioned you chose a voice for your Twitter, and like you made sure to present like as a nice dad, and your audience responded. Who was in charge of doing that? Was the writer involved, or did you guys just come up with like, oh, here's a good one. This is what we would say.
It was Vernon and I, and we were doing a really great job of, doing good dad jokes because, I don't know, I feel like it's really easy to just be like, take care of yourselves, like, I'm your dad. And then I guess we went out for cigarettes and never came back because we don't really tweet on the account anymore.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's all us. Whoa, okay,
Yes. Speaking of the internet and Twitter, as soon as I realized that this was not just about embarrassing yourself not embarrassing yourself on the internet.
Oh, there was plenty of that.
And realizing that it was about Dream Daddy, I immediately tweeted at Erika Ishii saying, in a talk about Dream Daddy and about how not to embarrass yourself on the interwebs, thinking about you, Erika Ishii. She said, I know that first thing, and the key to the second thing is not to feel shame like a normal human being and just go for it. And for anybody who doesn't know, Erika Ishii is the voice of the daughter in Dream Daddy.
Precious Amanda. Also, hey, yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of when we started working on Dads, and it was also Amanda's birthday, so happy birthday, Amanda. Play her last name, yay! Clap for the fictional character. Thank you, yes, Erika is wonderful. You're just gonna read a tweet?
Well, no, just that, kind of, but yeah.
Okay.
No, I agree with that. This has probably been the most human talk I've been involved in.
Thank you, I did it.
You did it, yay, you did
Yay.
good.
Yeah, I think the shame thing is like also if you are terminally online, like I am, you kind of just have to step away from it a bit and just not listen to the hot takes of like every 13-year-old who's like, you suck and you should die. Like, you just gotta step back and like go outside sometimes, which seems like a very reductive take, but sometimes it's what you gotta do. You?
Okay, I didn't understand 50% of the first few minutes of your talk where you were memeing at me,
Great.
and I genuinely laughed at your dad pun. Should I just sort of stay away from this trying to do what you've done here?
Well, I don't think you have to. I think it's just the understanding of like, I've lost my train of thought. I don't know. I don't think you necessarily have to understand memes because the whole point isn't, don't try to directly do memes. Why didn't I go longer? I don't have good answers to questions. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you for your question. Oh, God. Hi. Hello.
Well, the point was don't use memes, right?
What?
The point was don't use memes, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was it. That's what the talk was about.
Yeah. Good talk.
Thanks.
Do you have any examples of dads that didn't fit this criteria and like were scrapped dads, ghost dads? Oh no.
I think I wanted to do like a surfer dad, like a real beach bum, like just kind of hangs out in the beach house dad. But that there would have been like no conflict there because I just would have been like, hey man, like come surf. And I think there was actually, like Brian originally was going to just be like the sweet cinnamon roll dad who was just nice. And then we started writing that and we were like, if someone's just a cinnamon roll, there is no such thing as conflict in this game. It's just not a 130,000 word coffee shop AU. So we ended up, like, I was like, oh shoot, I really wish that we had a rival dad because I just want like another dad and you to duke it out. And then we were like, let's just scrap Brian's path. Like, let's make him the rival dad. Sure, we have the assets. We're not changing it. We're just gonna rewrite it. So Brian was once a very sweet boy and now he's still a sweet boy, but beneath the rival exterior.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you. Oh, okay, thank you.
Hey there, brilliant talk. So actually, the gentleman over there actually brings up a good point. So as we, as creators, age, one of the things that I'm, I guess, fearing is that we're getting further and further away from the conversation itself that's happening around the internet. So like one of us, might be using On Fleek when we're like 40, still for some reason. So my question is like, how exactly do you keep yourself in the conversation as you age?
Hire younger people would be an answer to that one. But I know that it can be really difficult. And that's also just like following the right people on social media. Like if you're just following people your age, like you really kind of want like a scatter shot.
Right.
From all age groups because, yeah. But going back to the other point, it's just like, make sure your thing is good. Because if you do a thing and it's just like, and I'm not implying that this is what you're gonna do, but if you're just like, I just want 100,000 retweets, like, it's not gonna go so hot. But yeah, just quality first, and then memes.
All right.
But not that.
Quality first, but also not perfect.
Thank you. What he said. Hello.
I mean, I just got to this one. You could do those guys.
Oh. Hi, hello.
Hi.
I like the lights are so bright, you guys are just like indistinct blurs, so hello, blur.
So with regards to writing and narrative design, I was curious about how, when you have characters that you're writing and also you have a visual representation, and then with voice acting as well, delineating, like basically how specific you go with each given character. As far as, because like as soon as you start voicing a character, then that actually kind of closes off what that character can be to a player. Is that making sense? Like as far as
No,
like,
that 100% makes sense. That's why we did not do fully voiced things, because we pretty much just have dad grunts. And even that I was like a little nervous about doing, because I think so much of like game culture right now happens as a result of Let's Plays, and like half the fun of a Let's Play is seeing what kind of voice the Let's Players choose to do for the characters. And so we just wanted to keep it like really minimal while still having, some fun cameos from people that hopefully players would enjoy hearing make a lot of weird dad noises.
did you find that there was a wide disparity on like how people voice certain dads, or was it fairly consistent?
So like, how stressful it is like when you write something and then you have to like read it in front of a group of people. Imagine that, but then you look at the view count and it's like 3 million, and then you're like, okay, I can't do this. So I've watched maybe like one episode of one Let's Play, so I don't know. Thank you. You were waiting. Hello.
Okay, so I haven't played Dream Daddy, but
That's okay.
I went to both your talks and they're both excellent, so now I have to play it. I wanted to ask about process. I wanted to ask about research. What were the most difficult things to research, and how did you take some of the things that you mentioned in your talk, like couching, brain fart, sincerity within cynicism or within silliness? How did that inform your research? Like, did you go, what cynical, like?
Yeah, I think with writing a comedy game, the first thing that we figured out when we were making the big flowcharts of like, here's how the narrative works, and this happens, like, along with figuring out like, okay, here's the basic character arc, one of the first things we nailed down for each character was like, what is the emotional core of this story? And then just layering lots and lots of jokes on it and just making sure that like, it's a gradual path down. Like if you date Robert, who's the bad dad, like, I mean, you guys just run around and like eat pizza in an alley, and then he makes a joke about like, this is where I come to masturbate, and like you whittle and all that stuff. But then like his story gets kind of like dark and sad later. So it's just more of like a gradual, you gotta wade into it, I think. But with the research, I think the research ties itself to the sincerity, because you are finding what the truth in this story is. And it was really interesting reading the books. Like I read one book that was written by like a heterosexual father, and then I read Does This Baby Make Me Look Straight? And like, Does This Baby Make Me Look Straight is the sweetest, like, they're the most thoughtful parents. And then reading the straight dad book, it's like, I'm threatened by my son, even though he is 8 years old, and my wife's authority threatens my masculinity. It's like, God, dude, pull it the fuck together. So yeah, like it's also just like picking and choosing what works for you and what doesn't, because obviously we did not want to have a dad who's like, I'm a big, strong man, and I don't need to have feelings talks with my children because that threatens my identity. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. We got 5 minutes. What's up?
All right. Thank you first, because I didn't realize I needed to see AO3 in a talk until now, and it was great.
I got you.
Yeah, and when you build a game for inclusivity and you build your Twitter for your outreach for inclusivity, what is your mentality when people still feel unincluded? Like, how do you reach out to those people, and what's your general approach there?
There is no such thing as perfect representation, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive for it. You just kind of have to accept that some people are, it's just, I wish people could, on the internet, could learn the phrase, this is not for me. And that's okay. And that can be a really difficult thing, because like you can really try your hardest and like be taking as many steps as possible at every single step of like, okay, is this inclusive and this inclusive? We have all these consultants, and like you can still fuck up real bad. And I think another important thing, especially in regards to social media, is never, ever market your game on the inclusivity. Don't do it. It is the bare minimum, not a thing you should get cookies for. Like, and also people will come down on you so hard because it's super transparent of like, well, we put fat people in this game, so give us a pat on the back. That's, sorry, no, that's not a dig. That's not a dig. That's not a dig.
No,
I'm
laughing because that's hysterical. No.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, just because people, like the moment you say that you're inclusive, like people are gonna be like, well, how inclusive is it really? And then you will get call out posts. But yeah, just do it because it's the right thing to do and it's good storytelling, not, you know.
Thank you.
Whatever.
Your experience and sharing it was really valuable.
Thank you. Yay. Hello.
Hey, hi. So I came to the talk thinking that it was about how to put your game out there without being embarrassed. But I think what I understood was the opposite. It was like being embarrassed is the way. Yeah? All right.
Yeah. My entire brand is just how fucking ready I am to get off of this stage.
All right, so my question is if I understood it right. Seems like, yeah, thanks.
Oh, yay. All right, okay, no, we're done. Thank you. You guys are great. Yay.